Today we are going to take a look at the second half of section 2.5. So you watched your first half of 2.5 and did your practice work with consecutive integers already. And today we are going to shift gears and look at a different type of story problem, which are going to be problems involving perimeter. So if you recall from middle school, perimeter is defined as the distance around a figure, whatever that figure might be. So a lot of those problems had to do with building fences around the edges of something. We are going to be focusing most of our time on rectangles. So when we look at the perimeter of a rectangle, it is the sum of all four sides. In a rectangle, two sides are called the length and two sides are called the width. So to find perimeter, P here, it's going to be L plus W plus W. So length plus length plus width plus width. Or this that you see here is sort of your simplified form of it. Perimeter equals 2L, so we combined our like terms, plus 2W. This is an equation that we are going to want to know as we move forward. So you want to make sure you've written that down or mark it in your notes somehow. You're going to want to know this as we move on. So if we move into our first example here, it says the length of a rectangle is 6 inches more than its width. The perimeter of the rectangle is 24 inches. What is the length of the rectangle? So if I label my rectangle over here and I call these two sides length and then these two sides the width, that would match the picture that you saw on the first screen. But I'm being told up here that the length of the rectangle, so that's my L here, is, we know that is means equal, 6 inches more than its width. So 6 more than meant that we needed to add back from chapter 1 the width. So that would be true for both sides where we have the length written. So now notice how I have the ability to describe every side of my rectangle with something that has to do with W. So that's valuable to us because we do not yet know how to solve equations that have two different variables in them. So now I can just use W in my equation. So perimeter is all of the sides added together. So if I start at the top, I have the top is 6 plus W, and then plus W, so that's the right-hand side, plus the bottom is again 6 plus W, and then the left-hand side is just W. So I can add together all of those sides, and this is supposed to represent perimeter. So if I go to this second sentence, the perimeter of the rectangle is 24. So this would be equal to 24. So now I can work on simplifying this left-hand side of the equation. I have lots of like terms going on here. So all of these terms that are W's are like terms. And we know that when we don't see the coefficient, technically all of these W's have 1s in front of them. So I also have these 6's in play, which would be constant terms, so they are like terms as well. So when I combine my like terms together, 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 would give me 4W. And then 6 plus 6 would give me 12, so plus 12 would be equal to 24. So now I have an equation that looks a lot like what we've been solving throughout the course of chapter 2. So I need to work to solve this for W. So here's my wall through my equal sign, and I need to get W by itself. So I am going to subtract 12 from both sides. When I do that, the 12s on the left-hand side are going to cancel out. So I can say that 4W is equal to 12. And then I need to get W by itself. So to do that, I need to divide both sides by 4. And 12 divided by 4 would give me 3. So I can say that W, or width, that's what W stands for, is equal to 3. Now, since this is a story problem, I need to make sure that I'm using the correct label. So everything here is being labeled in inches. So the width would be 3 inches. Now this also asks me though, or specifically asks me to find the length. It doesn't actually ask me for the W, but to find the length, I had to know the width. But if I go back up here, if you see here, I have this equation that tells me about length. Length equals 6 plus W. Well, now I know that W is 3. So I can say that the length is equal to 6 plus 3, which is a pretty easy one for us to work out. We know that 6 plus 3 would give us 9. So the length of the rectangle is 9, and again we need our label, so 9 inches. So this is really the only part that we were being asked to find here, was the measure for length. All right, let's move on to another one. So on this one, again, we have a rectangle drawn for us. It says the length of a rectangle is 3 times the width. The perimeter of the rectangle is 88 feet. What is the length and the width of the rectangle? So same idea. I have 2 sides of my rectangle that are going to be length and 2 sides that are going to be width. Now the first sentence says the length of a rectangle, so that's what we're using L for, is, so equals 3 times the width. Well, we can write 3 times the width as 3W, which if length is that at the top of the rectangle, it's going to be the same at the bottom of the rectangle. And then the second sentence tells us about perimeter. So again, perimeter is all of the sides added together, and now we can describe all of the sides in terms of W. So we can say that 3W plus W plus 3W plus 1 more W is going to be the expression that describes the perimeter. And from this second sentence, we know that the perimeter is 88. So this is equal to 88. So now on the left-hand side, hopefully you notice that all of the terms over there have a W in them, meaning that they are all like terms. So we can simplify this. 3 plus 1 would give us 4, plus 3 more is 7, plus 1 more is 8. So we can say that 8W is equal to 88. Sorry about that, guys. Is going to be equal to 88. So now I have an equation again that I can solve. This one is even a little easier than the last one. It only is going to require one step to get W by itself. And that one step is going to be to divide both sides by 8. So I'm going to divide by 8 here and divide by 8 here. So these are going to cancel each other out. 88 divided by 8 will give me 11. So I can say that the width of this rectangle is 11. Again, I need a label. So if I read back up here, I can see that they are describing everything in feet. So the width would be 11 feet. This is part of what they asked me to find. They wanted length and width. So this is part of my answer, but I am going to have to do a little more work because they also asked me for length. But if I go over here, again, I see that I already have this equation that describes length to me. So length is equal to 3 times W, and I now know that W is 11. So I can say that the length of this rectangle is 3 times 11. And we know that 3 times 11 is going to give us 33. So the length of this rectangle is 33. Again, make sure you use your labeling because it's a story problem, so it would be 33 feet. So this is the second half of our answer. In terms of the test, you would need both of these parts to earn full credit on this question. Moving on to the next one, same idea again. The width of a rectangle is 10 yards more than twice the length. The perimeter of the rectangle is 98 yards, and we're being asked to find the length and width. So if we take a look at this one, we can label our rectangle. So I can label here length and width. But if we go to the wording this time, something a little different is happening. This time they're describing the width to us. So it says the width of the rectangle, so that's our W, is, so equals 10 yards more than twice the length. So 10 more than means we're going to add, so plus. Twice means to multiply by 2, so 2 times L. So if that is the width over there, then it will be the same over here on the right-hand side. So I'm going to have to squeeze it in, but the same thing, 10 plus 2L. So now I have every single side I can describe with something that has an L in it, so all the same variable. And if I add all of the sides together, that's going to tell me the perimeter. So the top plus the right side plus the bottom plus the left side tells me the perimeter. So I added up all of the sides, so that's going to tell me perimeter. And if I go back up and look at the wording, it says the perimeter of the rectangle is, so equals 98 yards. So is equal to 98. So again, I've created an equation I can solve. I do have some like terms here. So I have an L here, which is a 1L. I have a 2L here, another 1L here, and a 2L here. So those would all be like terms. And then I also have like terms in these positive 10s. So these constant terms that are positive 10 are also like terms. So if I combine like terms on the left-hand side, I have 1L plus 2L. That would give me 3. Plus 1 more is 4. Plus 2 more is 6. So I have 6L. 10 plus 10 gives me 20, so plus 20. And this is equal to 98. So now I've simplified this to an equation that we have the ability to solve. So here's our wall through our equal sign. I need to work to get L by itself. So I'm going to start by subtracting 20. 98 minus 20 will give us 78. So these over here on the left-hand side are going to cancel out, and I can say that 6L is equal to 78. And then we need to get L by itself, so we need to divide by 6. So those 6's on the left-hand side are going to cancel. 78 divided by 6 will give you 13. So we can say that L is equal to 13. And you need your label in place again. So if you look for your label up here, we can see everything's being measured in yards. So the length would be 13 yards, which is part of what they've asked us to find, but they've also asked us to find the width. So if we look around, we can see that over here on the rectangle, we have this equation that tells us about the width. Your width is equal to 10 plus 2 times L, which is the length, which we now know. So we can say that our width is equal to 10 plus 2 times 13. And when we simplify this, if you're using a calculator, you can put it in exactly like you see it right now. But if you're not using a calculator, we need to think about order of operations, which means we would need to multiply first here. So 2 times 13 would give us 26. And then 10 plus 26 is going to give us a width of 36. Again, one more time, you need that label. So that label in this case was yards. So we have a width of 36 yards and a length of 13 yards. So one final example, and then you are done. The perimeter of a garden is enclosed by fencing. The garden is in the shape of a rectangle and uses 776 feet of fencing. If the length of the rectangle is 58 feet longer than 3 times its width, how much fence was used for the length? So in this, they tell us that it's a perimeter problem. The perimeter of a garden is enclosed by fencing. So we have fencing on all 4 sides. So the distance around is the fence, which means that this value that we see up here, the 776, this is your perimeter value. This is P. If that's how much fencing they used, then that's how much we need to go all the way around the outside of the rectangle, which is the same as perimeter. So we are going to label this rectangle the same way we have been labeling all of them. So we have 2 sides that are length and 2 sides that are width. And then if we move into this sentence, it says if the length of the rectangle is, so L equals 58 feet longer than. So longer than is another way to say more than. So that is an addition statement. 3 times its width. So that would be 3 times W. So we now have this expression, 58 plus 3W, that describes our length. So that's what we're going to need to be successful with solving this problem. So now we can set up our equation. We know now that perimeter means add up all of the sides. So I have the top plus the right side plus the bottom plus the left side. So that's my expression that represents the perimeter, and we know that the perimeter is 776. So it's equal to 776. So the left-hand side is really long, but if I look at it, I have some like terms. So I have 3W, I have this W, which would be a 1W, 3W again, and then another 1W. So I have those for like terms, and I also have these 58s that would be like terms as well. So combining my W's, 3 plus 1 is 4, plus 3 more is 7, plus 1 more is 8. So I have 8W. 58 plus 58 is going to give me 116, so plus 116 is going to equal that perimeter value of 776. So now I have an equation that I can solve to try to find W. So I need to get W by itself, so I'm going to subtract 116 from both sides of the equation. So those will cancel out on the left-hand side. So those are going to cancel out over here on the left-hand side. These are gone. So I can say that 8W is equal to 660. And then I just need to divide both sides by 8. So when I do that, my 8's on the left-hand side are going to cancel out. And then I get a width value. So your width here is not a whole number value. We get a width of 82.5. And if we go back up into the wording of our problem and look for a label, we see this should be labeled in feet. So 82.5 feet. So this is your width. The problem asked us how much fence was used for the length though. So I need to work on solving for length. I can see that here over in the rectangle, like has happened in all of the other problems, I have an equation for length. Length is 58 plus 3 times W, and I now know that W is 82.5. So the length is going to be equal to 58 plus 3 times that width value that we got, which was 82.5. So if we work to simplify, again, much like the last one, if you want to plug this all into your calculator at once, you can, but if not, then you need to follow order of operations. So you would need to multiply first and then add. So if you multiply first, you get 58 plus 247.5, and then you can add those together. And when you add those together, we find out that the length is equal to 305.5, which would be labeled in the same way. So it would again be labeled in feet. So that's 305.5 feet. So we will practice with this more with a worksheet when I see you in class next time. Make sure that you have these notes with you.